This is the next part of lesson 2.7. We'll start looking at proportions now. So we can't do this activity, this classroom activity from the lesson book. So we're going to go ahead and look at part 1, estimation and calculation. So here are some values for China and the United States. And so looking at those numbers, those total numbers, this is 309 million people in the United States. And then China has 1.3 billion people. And then within the same these areas, they're about the same amount of space in China and the United States. So before doing any calculations, who do you think has the highest population density? And that would be China again, because there are more people, 1.3 billion compared to 309 million people within the same space, approximately the same space. So they'd be more dense there. And so again, looking at this here, we can answer those questions 4 and 5 with that idea. Now let's actually do the calculations of the density, which we come up with this ratio here, people per area, and you can see China has 361 to 362 people per square foot. United States is 83 to 84 people per square foot, just doing that calculation that we had learned, people divided by area. And so we're going to take that idea to answer some questions, of course, but we'll also look at what we call proportions, where we solve an equation where it's a fraction equal to a fraction. And to do that, one way you do that is through cross multiplying. And so use a cross multiplication method. So if you have a fraction equal to a fraction, like we have here, you can end up writing it this way: A times D is equal to B times C, in order to solve your equation, right? And so here are some examples, some numerical examples from just algebra without word problems. And so looking at those problems there, you can see these things are true. So when we cross multiply here, when you do 4 times 35 and 5 times 28, you can see these are true. Those two fractions are equivalent. Here, these fractions are not equivalent. So when you check through cross multiplying, you can also see they're not. So that's what allows us to solve these proportion problems. When two fractions are equal to each other, you can cross multiply to check. Or cross multiply to solve. So in this case, you end up with x equals 63. And where that comes from, you do x times 45 would be your beginning, and then you're going to do 81 times 35. And when you do that, you get to here, get 2835. And then when you use your equation skills, you get x equals 63. Here you would do 80 times, you get 400 equals 17x, and then that leads you, when you divide, you get that there. And so again, these are the basic skills of solving proportion problems. And so in this case, you get 12n is equal to 35, and then you get your n right there. Here, when you cross multiply, notice you end up here and here. This is what you end up with, and then you would solve this equation. So take a look again, but that's the process of solving a proportion when you have an equation, one fraction equal to another fraction. And so what's going to come up is a whole bunch of problems just for you to practice. I have the solutions here. I'm not going to explain them all. Once we look at the first two, we can take a look at how we go from there, and then I have the solutions so you can check your work for the rest of them. But just looking at a few of them, let's start with question 9 now. These are word problems, so what you want to do is write them so that you write them in the same ratios. 5 gallons is $15.95. How much would it cost for a 13-gallon tank? Notice 5 gallons. I write 13 gallons and then a question mark, because that's what I'm looking for. How much would it cost? I transfer that into just algebra. I like to write the words when we first start proportions, so we keep them in the same ratio, gallons per dollar or whatever. This one here, and then you have dollars per US dollars per Canadian dollars. And so as long as you keep the ratios equivalent, you can then answer those questions, how many of each. And once you get it into these forms here, then it's just cross multiplying like we did here to solve for the missing value. And so you can see what we have here. And so I'll kind of pause here so you can take a look. If a 23-acre alfalfa field produces 115 tons. How many acres? Again, I'm looking for acres, so that becomes the question mark. Then ultimately comes the variable. So I like to write it again with the units so that we keep everything matched up. So how you write the units will tell you if you put the numbers correctly and if you have the question mark, what you're looking for, right? How many grams of fat? That's why my question mark's on the bottom, because I had 32 grams for 2.5 grams of fat. And then you cross multiply to solve. Here are some more, so you can take a look at those. And then lastly, I'll go to the last page so you can see those here. You can see those solutions there. And then the last question here, you can then solve that one. So that's it for lesson 2.7.